Ah, ahoy!
Come on!
Now before we talk about God of War, let's talk about God of War.
It was 2005 when Sony and Santa Monica Studios unleashed God of War upon us, and it was a phenomenal game, giving you a tour through Greek mythology with engaging combat, insane cinematics, fun puzzle solving and platforming, and a main character that was so captivating that he immediately became a video game icon and Sony's next big mascot. We then got a sequel in 2007, God of War 2 on the PlayStation 2, and it was another tremendous success. A lot of people argue that this is one of the best games released that year, which is an insane statement because 2007 was arguably the greatest year for gaming with the 7th generation in full swing, and a game from the past gen getting the Game of the Year votes? No wonder the PlayStation 2 was the greatest console of all time. But then we reached God of War 3 on the PlayStation 3, and oh my God of War, this game is fucking incredible, dude! It took everything that was great about the series beforehand and vamped it to the fucking max. Probably the most badass game of all time, and one of my favorite video games of all time. But you see, God of War 3 ended with a cliffhanger. He destroyed Greek mythology. What's next? Well, people always speculated that the only thing he could do was move on to another mythology. Norse, Egyptian, flying spaghetti monster. Well, after a very long wait, we finally got the unveil for God of War 4, titled simply God of War at E3 2016, and it was probably the greatest moment in E3 history. Go rewatch that crowd reaction. But besides that, hell yeah, we finally get to know what Kratos did after God of War 3, and that is move on to Norse mythology and have a new family.
Again, I wasn't paying attention to video games at the time, but even I heard about the insane craze of this game from its reveal to its release, and how it was considered unanimously Game of the Year for 2018 before it even came out.
When I got back into gaming in 2020, I couldn't wait to play this game. I've waited a very long time to find out what happens with Kratos, and in the 2 years since this game's release, I managed to avoid any spoilers.
And then when I finally played it, I liked it, but I didn't love it. That sounds familiar. But unlike Breath of the Wild, where I felt that the game made changes that lost the game's identity, the degree of how God of War lost its identity is, say your dog left the house and came back a banana. It was a completely different game. It's not even God of War anymore. The only thing these two things share is Kratos himself. Which I hated back then because God of War was such a unique and varied game, and now it just felt like any other game. What especially didn't help was being alienated, because anytime I try to discuss with people my issues with it, they'd look at me like I was brain dead. And that really furthered my groanish towards this game. But if I learned anything from replaying Breath of the Wild, that's my own fault. God of War is now a different type of game, and now that I know what type of game it is, I can go into it with appropriate expectations and to see if I can get enjoyment out of it like others have. But also to see if I can get across what I've been trying to say for the last couple years. And I'll tell you why you're wrong about everything. Whoa, how the hell did you get back in here? Oh, I climbed in through the back. Climbed in through the... Wow. Okay, not gonna lie, that's impressive. Thanks, I know, right? It's honestly not as hard as it looks. As long as you can comfortably knock out some pull-ups and some push-ups, everyone should be able to... Oh, come on! I'm not kidding. I'm not having you stay here while I play all these games. But I have to. You're going down the wrong path with these games, and as your guardian angel, I thought you were my good twin. I'm whatever the video needs me to be. A fucking nuisance. And as your guardian angel, it is my job to make you see the light and realize that you love these games so you can understand the true meaning of Christmas. It's July! Listen, I don't need you here. I managed to find my love for Breath of the Wild all on my own, and I will again do it with God of War without you. You know what? Fine then, Soblev. Have it your way. But just so you know, I am going to mercilessly knock on your window until you let me in. Yeah, sure you will. I didn't think he fucking meant it. Get in.
God of War 2018 starts with Kratos chopping down a tree, and then we get to meet his son Atreus. They are holding a funeral service for Atreus' mother until suddenly the Norse god Baldur comes to their house to start some trouble, and it's just so annoying when someone doesn't
leave my home.
What?
Anyway, we make Baldur go away and set off with Atreus on a journey to teach him how to survive and to spread his mother's ashes at the highest point in all the 9 realms. From there, rather than being linear like the series beforehand, it's instead more open and free to roam. Now, calling it an open world doesn't necessarily feel right, because you can't just go anywhere. It's instead more like a large, continuous, interconnected environment. Kinda like Dark Souls, which if it sounds like a complaint, it's not. I like Dark Souls. I especially enjoy when we got to access the Bifrost and we're allowed to travel between realms. Not all realms are available, but that's fine, we have to save stuff for sequels. But you see, it's not a simple stroll to a mountain. Kratos and Atreus are constantly being pursued by the Norse gods, and the realms they traverse are having an epidemic of undead ghouls appearing to ruin everyone's good time.
So now let's start off with what I think is great about God of War. Not like you need to, everyone knows why it's a great game. I'm already regretting letting you stay.
For one, the game is such an insane technical achievement. The game looks unbelievable, the character models, the environments, all the details, oh, it's so good! Definitely the best looking game on the PlayStation 4. Don't let the grainy footage I'm showing you fool you. The game is so outstanding that not only can't my capture card handle it, but even the PlayStation 4 seems to be struggling to run it. This thing is loud, it's like a fucking jet engine. You can hear it from another room.
Are you playing without me?
It also gets so hot it heats up whatever room you're playing in. I can cook eggs on this thing. But besides that, my favorite thing about the whole game was Kratos himself and his relationship with his son. Kratos was so captivating. Watching how he handles situations and how he tries to impart wisdom upon Atreus from his own experience without necessarily sharing that experience because he's ashamed of who he was great. And the father-son dynamic too was a lot of fun to watch develop. Seeing them both grow in their own ways but also experiencing the bumpy roads and getting through them was done extremely well and a lot of fun to watch. I heard some people criticize Atreus and call him annoying, especially when he went through a bit of a rebellious phase and started acting like a huge wang after finding out that he was a god. But listen, have you ever had kids? They will have times when they are annoying, and while I don't have kids, just annoying guardian angels, I know if they ever act up, a simple trip to Helheim will solve it.
So are you ever gonna get to the point of the video, or... Who are you calling? I'm calling the police.
But anyway, let's get to the reasons why this game makes me sad. Now, instead of just listing out the problems I have with the game, I feel like in a video where I just want to talk about how God of War 2018 lost God of War's identity, I should instead list what was great about the prior God of War games and seeing how this game changed. So our topics are going to be the story and how that affects the gameplay, camera, platforming, puzzle solving, and combat, with that last one being an area we will probably spend the most time in. So anyway, with story and gameplay, one of the most ridiculous things I've heard people say is how the game finally gave God of War a good story. Tell me you haven't played any of the previous titles without telling me you haven't played any of the previous titles. Say this dumb statement. Now yes, while God of War 2 and 3 were simple revenge plots and Kratos was honestly really one-dimensional most of the time, Mr. Game & Watch has more depth, but God of War 1 had such an incredible story, especially with how it was told. The game felt like a biblical tale. I'm sure Sunday schools are gonna cover it. The prequels were also so full of emotion. Chains of Olympus made pressing circle rapidly one of the hardest things I ever had to do. If you know, you know. Now while I did say I really enjoyed all the Kratos Atreus stuff, the rest of the game's main plot was honestly just the two of them getting constantly sidetracked or interrupted by something. We gotta go to this mountain. Uh-oh, something arbitrary is in the way. We gotta go to another realm to get another arbitrary thing to get rid of the first arbitrary thing. But then once we reach the mountaintop, we're told it's not the highest place in all the realms, and now we gotta find the actual one, which leads to even more sidetracking and arbitrary things.
The game is giving you objectives. Every game has objectives. What's the issue? I'm not complaining about the game having objectives. My issue is that whenever there is an objective, it always ends up with you going backwards. Backtracking is lame. You first get to the mountain, you leave it, and you eventually get back to it. But that's what you end up doing in these types of games. As you backtrack, you oftentimes will have access to new areas and paths, so you're not really retracing your steps. Plus, didn't you say earlier you like the Dark Souls style interconnected world? Yes, I like it for Dark Souls, not God of War. If I wanted to play a game that is that style, I'd play a game that is that style. But when I play a game like God of War, I want a game that's a bit more straight to the point and making me feel like I'm constantly making progress.
The way the game tells its story affects its gameplay in the sense that in previous games I feel more in line with Kratos, because when we see an obstacle or enemy that we need to get past, I feel like we are on the same page. Here though, the game pushes its open world onto you and urges you to explore and complete side quests by having Atreus straight up saying, "Hey, let's explore," in between each main objective completed. But the thing with that is, Kratos is so determined to just stay focused on the main task at hand, and he doesn't care and dismisses any distractions. But we can still do it, and the game covers it up by having the two act like they just stumbled upon it.
Oh man, what am I doing inside of a Jersey Mike's? Guess I'll get a sandwich. Subway is so much better. You're kidding, right?
But that's not the case. There's nothing on this beach besides the side quest. I came here because I wanted to do it, but Kratos acting like he doesn't care for it even though I'm controlling him creates a bit of a disconnect from him. I guess I missed the linear style of God of War because it made more sense based on what the story was and Kratos' personality. He doesn't fit in an open world setting. He's not a noble, good Samaritan protagonist who wants to help people, which is what works for other open worlds. He only cares for his business.
Open world cinematic games are where the gaming industry is right now. People want games you can bury tons and tons of hours into and get immersed, not just drop a lot of hard-earned money on a linear 8-hour experience. There's nothing wrong with linear games. What constantly has me putting off jumping into some modern titles is not being ready to commit so much time to them. I just sometimes want to play a game that can condense an entire epic adventure in a short time span, like how the God of War games used to be. But the games were starting to go stale. It needed this new freshen up with the gameplay. Oh, come on. It wasn't going stale because of the gameplay. God of War Ascension was a fine God of War game. Probably one of the best gameplay-wise. But what had people miffed a bit at the time was the fact that at this point we had just as many backstories as stories. After the God of War 3 cliffhanger, they released 2 more prequel games, and at that point it just felt like they were starting to milk the franchise. Sure, but for a series to succeed, it needs to evolve and oftentimes head in a new direction. Resident Evil is a great example of this, and this is too. The old God of War games ran their course. So in response to the games feeling stale and needing something new, they made the game like every other game?
Cinematic angles. What we call cinematic now is much different than what we called cinematic back then. These days, cinematic means the game will mostly be somewhat interactive cutscenes where we solely control the character. Back in the day, cutscenes were simply watching an FMV play out, which usually lasted a minute to tell a quick story beat, and back to playing we go. God of War, on the other hand, would have moments that could be cutscenes play out while you're playing the game. You'd be in full control doing what you're doing, and meanwhile in the background some insane shit would be happening. The game had a wide hard camera system in place, which not only did it often give you a much better field of view during combat, but I'll get to that later, but it also let the game frame it so that during gameplay it can have something important happening in the background without needing excessive cutscenes constantly slowing things down. God of War used to be able to have so much happen, but didn't let it interrupt gameplay with endless cinematics because of how it utilized this technique. The best example was in God of War 3, when we were in the city of Olympia, Kratos is fighting a horde of enemies while in the background we are seeing Helios fighting a Titan. But while all that's happening, in the foreground we see a monster enemy come into the screen and jump into battle. It was so cool, it was framed like a horror movie and at no point were we interrupted from playing. You can do this type of thing with this camera. God of War was truly the most epic cinematic game of all time. Now what about this God of War? Well, for one, gone are the sick camera angles, and instead we now have a fixed camera right behind and to the right of Kratos' head like every other fucking game these days. The new thing is how the game is all a single shot. The camera never cuts, and instead anytime something else needs focus, it'll fly to it and then back to Kratos. Now this camera system works for this game, and it's really well done. During intense action sequences, it feels more hectic from Kratos' perspective rather than just being zoomed out. Or during more emotional scenes, how the camera zooms in to create a more intimate space. The best utilization of this camera was when Kratos was on his way home to retrieve the Blades of Chaos, and the camera spins around as you see his dark past starts crawling back to him. The music builds up, the scenery gets darker until finally the camera turns, revealing Athena. Holy shit, I shouted the first time I played this. So while the camera has great uses, I do still feel it's limited. Like God of War 2018 didn't have as many sick cinematic moments as the older games, and it's probably because it'd be wasted since we don't see much from this new camera perspective. I mean seriously, do you think the battle against Poseidon would have been such a visual spectacle with 2018's camera work? It is the way it is because of how downscaled the game is and how oftentimes there isn't much happening on a grand scale during combat. When we are in a fight, that's all it is. There's not much depth or set pieces going off.
The game is doing something different with its camera work. It's more immersive. Games are in art form, and God of War is doing something here that no one's done before. Plus, like you said, the game isn't doing the barrage or badassery all the time. It's more mature than that. The game's a deep emotional tale. The camera reflects that. The story is more intimate, so the camera is too. And here lies the problem with cinematic games. The strive to tell you a story over giving you an insanely fun game to play is apparent here. Instead of sick action sequences with bombastic set pieces going off in the background, we have to be a bit more grounded because the story calls for it.
Platforming and puzzle solving. Honestly, my perception of the game might be in a much better place had the game at least let these two be somewhat still good. So God of War was a lot of fun with a good variety of puzzle solving and platforming. To start with platforming, Kratos used to be able to climb, jump, swim, swing, and glide to explore the areas we are in to progress and find secrets. Maneuvering across tough areas with traps also gave us gameplay variety in between fights. So to be good at God of War, you didn't just have to be good at combat, but also good at getting through areas that have precise platforming. But also, these basic fundamentals also allowed for varied combat. We can fight while climbing or in the air. Here in God of War 2018, Kratos doesn't even have a jump button. Only in these designated areas with these type of markings, you just go up to it and press the action button and Kratos will just leap across. You can't fuck up, there is no skill required. That by itself also continues to really limit Kratos. He can't leave the ground by our own command, so it restricts our freedom. I feel like I could make this jump from here, but no, Kratos can't jump. Instead I have to go around, slowly move this block, go back around, and then jump.
Oh, such fun!
Climbing too, there's nothing required of you besides walking up to the ledge, pressing circle, and just holding the stick in the direction you are climbing. And if he stops, just look around till you find the circle button again, and press it, job done! You can't go faster, there is no combat, there is no danger, there is no skill. It's just slow.
You do understand that it is no easy task for a game of this magnitude to run as smoothly as it does, with no loading screens, mind you. It's because during these climbing sequences or crawling sequences or even on the boat, the game is loading the next area. Explaining why it is the way it is doesn't make it better. This turd tastes like shit. Oh, that's because it's fecal matter and full of bacteria. Okay, it still tastes like shit. What an analysis. But besides that, during these sequences, oftentimes Kratos, Atreus, or Mimir are often talking to fill the space. So during these moments, you're also listening to what the characters are saying to progress either the lore or story. All I'm hearing is, once again, being a cinematic open world is getting in the way of fun gameplay.
Now with the puzzles, God of War had so many puzzles that are so different from one another, and it's great. Bunch of classics like Hera's Garden needing camera manipulation, the block rooms in Pandora's Temple, the portals from the Labyrinth. It's all great. In God of War 2018, it's the same fucking puzzles throughout the entire game. Throw your axe at the three symbols in the room, bring the flame to the door, pick up this crystal and slowly walk it over to set it in place. Do all that and do it all over again and again and again and again. It's lazy. Most of the time if something is in the way, just look around where you can throw your axe, cause that's all it ever is. You never get a eureka moment when figuring something out. At most it's a... Oh, there it is.
It's pretty underwhelming, and I think a big reason for it is because of how limited Kratos' mobility is. Before, when he used to be able to freely climb, jump, swim, swing, glide, all that allowed for multiple opportunities for different types of puzzles and vertical level design. But now, by him only having the ability to slowly jog and throw his axe, severely limits the variety of puzzles you're able to do.
Explaining why it is the way it is doesn't make it better.
What are you trying to prove here? Nothing, I just wanted to use your stupid argument against you. But anyway, the developers wanted to make the game accessible to a more wider audience. Some people are just not coordinated enough to do the precise platforming that the older games demanded. So what you're saying is, they dumbed it down because they think people are stupid. Don't say it like that. Santa Monica just wants to tell people a story and doesn't want something tough or stupid like that dumb climbing wall from Hades to ruin their enjoyment. Well, I'm just gonna refer to what I said earlier.
The strive to tell you a story over giving you an insanely fun game to play is apparent here.
Can I do that too? Oh, hell yeah!
Oh well, let's get into the main event, the combat. Boy, this is fucking repetitive. So something online I've seen people say is that God of War finally has a deep combat mechanic with the old games being mindless button mashing. Now, besides shifting buttons placement, it's pretty much the same at a skeletal value. We have a light attack that we can use for a combo, a heavy attack to sometimes launch enemies in the air to juggle them, we have special attacks, a rage, the ability to rip enemies apart, and a chance to ride a large enemy to take out smaller enemies. And listen, both these games can very well be button mashers. But also with both games, when dealing with harder foes or just playing at a higher difficulty, button mashing is gonna get you nowhere. But let's discuss all the differences we have here, which include, again, the camera, Atreus, enemy and boss variety, XP and leveling up, combos, magic and health management, and the consequences of our actions. Now with the camera being behind Kratos and us only being able to see what's in front of him really limited our field of view of the battlefield. Before, having a wide view of the whole battle was so useful when it came to managing the situation. Seeing what all enemies are doing, how much space I have to work with before an enemy sneaks up behind me, etc. Here, I'm not a fan because I can't see anything besides what's in front of me. I have no perception of the battlefield and I never know what's happening. I can't focus on an individual enemy for too long because I don't know if something's about to hit me. I do get on-screen indicators for danger, but I don't know what it is, so I just gotta start rolling out of the way and hope for the best. I never truly feel like I know what's going on, but what has helped me has been Atreus himself. With him, we are able to command his arrows and even his special moves, which really helps us control the room better, as proper utilization of Atreus will have him distract and stun enemies to let me better focus on whichever foe I want to particularly take out first. And if I'm ever in a pinch, he's been a great way to also deal damage if I ever need to space myself a bit, and he proved clutch in many scenarios. And honestly, as the story progressed, it was really cool seeing him grow as a warrior. At the start of the game, he's a bit docile, only good for a couple arrows here and there, but eventually he'll really start to get involved. Atreus really is the best part of the game's combat.
Wow, look at you enjoying story-based gameplay. Don't say that.
The enemy variety in God of War 2018 is annoyingly bad. It's just different variations of Draugrs, but in a variety of colors. It's like Mortal Kombat ninjas. God of War had generic enemies, but they were just fodder you can quickly rip through and build up your combo until the real challenge gets in the room. But here, all common enemies have too much health and it oftentimes is just them. Whenever the game tries to throw harder enemies at you, it just throws Draugrs with higher health and more damage output. So it's mindless hacking and slashing extended edition. And the game doesn't have the variety of combos to keep combat interesting, so it's gonna be exactly this all the time. The only time I have an enjoyable fight is whenever it involves these witches that feel much different than anything else in the game, and these giant apes. It is so rare for me to have a good fight where I'm actually engaged. God of War previously had such variety in enemies that whenever it reused them, it was fine because you fought like 10 different species since the last time you saw them. Here, you are dealing with the same enemies over and over and over, and the game's combat got boring so quick even Atreus starts saying,
"Guess we're doing this!"
I know, right? If you're calling the combat too easy or boring, just wait till you get to the harder enemies from the Realm Tears or even the Valkyries. Sure, those enemies are tough, but it's not necessarily better. It's just even more hacking and slashing and having to deal with enemies that can kill you really quick. What I'm saying is that you're either dealing with beyond boring enemy encounters that take way too long to kill, or really tough enemies that are just there to be punishing. I just want a happy middle. I want to have consistently good fights with nice enemy variety. And the game is so uncreative with its enemies, which is pathetic because Norse mythology isn't necessarily lacking with mythical creatures. Well, this just sounds like a skill issue if you ask me. Ah yes, the most useless f***ing argument I see.
About the boss battles in the game. Well, God of War has had probably the greatest boss battles in all of gaming. Epic showdowns with awesome scenery and so much diversity. Hell, at one point we fought a Titan. A Titan! How about here in God of War 2018? Well, we got a troll, and another troll, and another troll, a soul eater that you throw balls at, a dragon you throw balls at, and another troll, Baldur, another troll, a soul eater you throw balls at, another troll, soul eater you eat balls at, Baldur, 8 Valkyries, and another troll. Oh my god, the game has much boss variety as New Super Mario Bros. While I will admit that the battle against both of Thor's sons was pretty great, but the game throws so many trolls at you, you get tired of seeing them. Like, do something different, anything different. At one point, Atreus fell sick, and to cure him, Kratos needed to go to Helheim to retrieve the heart of the gatekeeper of the dead. Ooh, that sounds menacing. Oh my god, is that him? Nope, it's actually another f***ing troll!
At this point, would you say they're trolling you? That is funny. I'm just not gonna laugh.
Now when it comes to the RPG elements, again, I don't care for it. Just too many items with stat boosts that feel so minuscule.
Mr. Soblev, after years of dedication, we are giving you a raise of 5%. Thank you, sir.
The game is mostly tedious combat and walking around finding chests and getting equipment you'll often not use. Solving the same puzzles for nothing. I hate going through items that have such slight stat boosts, especially when they even subtract from other stats. Looking at this plus minus made me think of the quadratic equation, which makes me mad for other fundamental reasons.
Trig.
My rule is, if I'm scrolling at the menu, there's too many options. I don't mind the skill tree though, I definitely think it should have been balanced better. Atreus' electrical arrows became broken way too quickly in the game. Though it did get me through lame fights much faster. So you know what? I take it back. I love the skill tree because you can break it early in the game and work your way quickly through boring as f enemy encounters. I don't care for axe pommels, especially when some of them are aesthetically the same fucking thing with just some slight different numbers.
Gosh, I hate RPGs. The game wants to incorporate popular RPG elements. It's not its fault that you hate it. And plus, didn't the older God of War games have RPG elements too? And you love those games so much. I loved God of War because they didn't have all the junk. Every time you leveled up something in that game, you immediately felt it because it was apparent. I hate subtle differences that I'm supposed to be grateful for. And plus, the concept of armor for Kratos is fucking stupid. Really? The guy who murdered an entire mythology shirtless now needs armor to not be killed by dark elves? The guy who we in this game watched move a gigantic mountain-like structure now needs me to level up his strength so he can swing his axe slightly stronger? It's stupid to even think about. The RPG elements in this game feel fucking forced.
Previously, comboing was important in God of War because depending on how long you can combo enemies, you got more XP for it and you could use that XP to level up your weapons and become more powerful. So it was very rewarding to get that number as high as you can because the benefits were great. Here on the other hand, there really is no reward for comboing, so there's no real incentive. At the end of each battle, you get a set amount of XP, which is kinda lame. And honestly, the game really could have used it because 80% of the combat scenarios are repetitive, tedious, and boring and could have used the variety of combos to keep the game interesting. Instead, it's all mindless swinging and the enemies are also fucking boring. What really doesn't help is that I don't even need to be totally engaged. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking in terms of magic and health management and the consequences of our actions. In God of War, you always had to be cautious for your health and magic, as those don't fill up easily. To get health or magic back, you had to be banking on there being a chest containing them up ahead, and if not, well shucks, good luck to ya! This created a sense of strategy, as you had to pick and choose when to use a powerful magical attack, because if you use it up in one area, you have to be hopeful there's a chest to replenish your magic, because if there isn't, you'll have to go into the next fight with no magic. So the games weren't mindless button mashers of spamming proportions. If you were in a tough battle, you really had to think if you wanted to use your magic now or save it in case there was a harder fight ahead where you could surely use that magic more. It's the same thing with health. You want to fight carefully instead of recklessly because if you take too much damage, you risk going to the next fight with no health. You can't just die and come back with full health. No, when you come back to your last checkpoint, you'll have the same amount of low health you started with. So it made the game engaging because I had to think ahead constantly in that regard. Especially times when I get a chest that'll only let me have health or magic, so I had to really think what I want to replenish to get me through the next combat encounter. With God of War 2018, there's none of that. Magic attacks after use recharge and takes between 30 seconds to a minute before being available again. So you can pretty much start each fight spamming all your magic attacks and soon you'll have them all back to use them again within the fight. You never have to worry about health because enemies often drop healing stones or you'll just find them scattered all over the place after a fight for sure. So health is abundant and not something you'll need to worry about. If you play poorly, play no defense and get into another fight with no health and die, you just come back with full health even if you didn't have it before. So it doesn't matter. There are no consequences in this game. There's no big picture mindset with combat, no strategy, no planning, nothing. The game's fighting is bare bones and fucking boring. There's no incentive to play creative, no variety in attacks, no forethought in resource management, no fun enemy variety, endless trolls, no sick scenery, forced RPG elements, lame puzzles, and platforming that's all done for you. Holy shit, this game sucks.
So the game is made for a wider audience, not just a hardcore gamer. God of War 2018 did simplify a lot of these things, but that's because it's really trying to keep it accessible. Games with complex combat are tough to jump into if you haven't played it in a while. You remembered Horizon Zero Dawn, right? I knew you were gonna bring that up. It's a game you played and enjoyed that had complex combat, and you were good at it. But then you stopped for a while and now it's hard for you to get back into because all the weapons and handling the different types of enemies is a bit intimidating and you don't remember. But God of War beforehand wasn't that complex. It was easy to learn, hard to master gameplay. It felt good to get good at those games. Here though, there's barely any skill. Not just with combat, but with every other aspect of the game. You know, I think the issue is actually much deeper than we think. I don't think you hate God of War 2018. I just think you hate open world cinematic games. No, I don't hate open world cinematic games. There's things I like about them and things I don't like about them. What I hate is the fact that God of War had to become one of them when beforehand it was something much better. I hate the fact that all video games got into an orgy and now everyone's infected with this need to be an open world cinematic adventure. Did you just say orgy?
God of War 2018 is a major letdown. It took everything special about the series and stripped away all of it to make a game that is similar to a bunch of other games. And it's not even a good one. It's just a game that mostly has you wander around and opening chests. Sure, the game looks pretty, but if it wasn't for Kratos himself, no one would give a shit for it. If it was just some random schlub named Jared, we wouldn't give a damn about it or him scolding his son for killing a god. But because of the fact that it's Kratos and we know his history with gods, the line of him yelling at Atreus about the consequences of killing a god carries so much weight because we've seen him do it and endure the consequences. And for me, that's what's kept this game playable. What kept the slow, unfun moments from totally dragging was Kratos. Every time he speaks, I find myself hanging off every word and going into my own deep dives about what experience he had to lead him to saying what he said. I think God of War 2018 is so dependent on that, because on its own, there's nothing special about it. It's a bunch of wandering around, finding chests, and monotonous fights. The bigger story isn't anything grandiose to stay on its own, and the father-son drama is only relevant because of Kratos. The first time I played the game, I was so disappointed as I played and realized the game took away everything that was great about the series. And now, with the second playthrough, even with knowing what kind of game it was, I still found myself disappointed because I sit here and think, really? This is what people think is better?
Yes.
I really was always curious why a bigger deal wasn't made about God of War 2018 being a totally different game, not being a bigger point of discussion. Well, I think it might be my fault actually.
Told you. Let me finish. I fell out of video games in 2013 and didn't really pay attention to them. So I missed out when these open world cinematic adventures were taking over the industry with titles like The Last of Us. Maybe if I didn't fall out and continued playing, maybe my taste would have evolved too with the rest of the worlds. And I'd enjoy it more. Instead, I checked out with the perception of the games being this way, came back, and that's just not the case anymore.
It's like coming home from work to your wife and now she's actually just a Chrysler building. That's frustrating. But I also have to consider this. It was a very long time waiting for this game. Now while the actual distance between the last God of War game and this game's reveal at E3 was 3 years, but that was a prequel. Since God of War 3, it was a 6-year gap, and it felt much longer than that. People wanted to know what happens next. They wanted to see Kratos' next big adventure. So people were just happy to finally have it rather than being critical. But I'm not happy to have it. It was great to see Kratos again, but not like this. To give my rating, I'm putting it at a 6 out of 10. The visuals, few good moments, and Kratos himself really had to carry this game on their back to give it at least that rating. Because honestly, everything else is pretty lackluster.
Oh wow, no clickbait this time? Yeah, I only felt like that was gonna be funny once. Well, I hate to break it to you. You didn't do it for God of War 2018. I still hold that sore spot for it. I think it sucks as a game and is a pathetic God of War title. It can't be helped. Thing is, we're comparing two completely different games. No one's denying it. I completely understand that you preferred the genre that the older games were, but that doesn't necessarily make this bad. Let me ask you something. You mostly like the story of the game, and that's what mostly kept you playing, right? Right. And in a story-driven game, that means what the game was aiming for, it accomplished, right? To a degree, but that doesn't change. Then let me ask you this. Do you honestly see yourself never playing this game again? No. I can't look at it and say never. Despite everything I hate about it, I still feel like I'm gonna play it again to enjoy the story because it had great moments. And now would you say you're looking forward to Ragnarok to see where things go? Yeah, I am. You really are a guardian angel. Damn straight. Well, there we have it. You replay Breath of the Wild and God of War 2018 and have a new perspective on them. I think we healed some scars, and I think you're ready to move on to the next games. Yeah, I guess so. Is it snowing in here? What in the...